Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. I really think we're living in a moment in history where God is separating the wheat from the tares and the sheep from the goats. That includes nations, it includes individuals. And I think the dividing line, actually, I know biblically, the dividing line in all of this is Israel. Either you're with God's land and you believe that God has eternal promises, an eternal covenant with that land, or you basically blame Israel and the Jewish people for all of the world's ills. That's where we are right now. You're on one side, you can't straddle both sides of that fence. You're on one side of that fence or the other. There's really no gray areas here. I believe it's the ultimate test of moral clarity today, where you stand on Israel and God's promises to Israel. And we see more and more. We've had the obviously jihadist anti-Semitism for centuries. The radical left anti-Semitism is through the roof. Look no further than American college campuses. Anti-Semitism on the right, people like Tucker Carlson, viciously anti-Israel. And when someone calls him anti-Semitic, he says, "How dare you?" Yet he's obsessed with Israel, and not in a good way. In nearly every podcast, he's bashing Israel or some kind of theory about Israeli involvement, again, in all of the world's ills. Candace Owens is another one. So we're in a dangerous moment right now. And all of this is intensified, if you can believe it, since the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust, October 7th, 2023. You would think maybe Israel would engender some sympathy, empathy in the wake of October 7th. But no, literally the next day, there were people in the streets protesting against Israel before Israel even had a chance to respond to the Hamas attack against the Jewish state. I say all that to say, we're talking wheat and tares, sheep and goats. Europe is on the wrong side of history on this. Large chunks of Europe on this issue on Israel. And I believe Europe is on the wrong side of God when it comes to Israel. And look no further. And me saying that will drive the replacement theology types batty, by the way, who believe that the church has replaced Israel. The church has inherited all of the promises God made to Israel. God's completely done with Israel and the Jews, finished. They're Christ killers, in the words of the replacement theology types. Not all, but many hold that view. And God has abandoned them, cast them off forever. Even though God's promises are eternal, he uses words everlasting and words like that throughout the Old Testament in particular, talking about his covenant with Israel. It's an unconditional covenant, yes. The people of Israel have not always behaved in a godly way over the past 2,000 years, but God says it's unconditional. I cannot break this covenant. And if he breaks his covenants and promises to Israel, then why wouldn't he just break his promises to each of us? So God can have an incredible plan for the church, for the Gentile church, people like me, and he does for the body of Christ. But he can also have an incredible plan for the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. The two are not mutually exclusive. He's a big God. He's got a lot of bandwidth, needless to say. But the replacement theology crowd says, no, 1948, the miraculous rebirth of Israel, it was just a happenstance of history. Just a coincidence. Nothing miraculous about it at all. Wow. I mean, you really have to stretch to look at what happened in 1948, the rebirth of the nation state of Israel after 2,000 years, and say, just a coincidence, just another country. No matter how you feel about Israel, whether you are for it, against it, you can't say it's just another country. Not only considering its refounding in 1948, which was, we've never seen anything like that in human history. But today, not only that, the founding, but today, the world is obsessed with Israel. Much of the world in a bad way, but all they talk about, I mentioned Tucker Carlson. I mean, all people want to talk about, I want to talk about Israel every day in a wonderful way. I love the nation of Israel. I see God's hand on it. the prophetic time clock is Israel. It's amazing to see what's happening. Israel's blessing the world. But much of the world doesn't see it that way, and they think Israel is a curse on the world, a war criminal, genocidal, literally the cause of all the world's problems. But make no mistake about it, Israel is the topic. It's a world obsession, let's face it. So clearly, it's not just another nation. And once again, we have Europe, who I mentioned a moment ago, the European Union in particular, obsessing over Israel, and one leader in particular who's taken the forefront. His name is Emmanuel Macron. He's the president of France. And today, he announced that he is unilaterally recognizing a Palestinian state. He is declaring the existence and the founding of a Palestinian state. He's going to do it at the UN General Assembly in September and make it official. But he doesn't care what Israel thinks. Key point. Israel's against this. He doesn't care. He's going to declare it anyway. Now, in Israel, they call it chutzpah, the chutzpah of Macron, the nerve. A man who doesn't even live in Israel, who doesn't rule over Israel, who's the president of France, telling Israel, you are going to accept a Palestinian state. We are going to impose this on you, whether you like it or not, you pesky Jews. And by the way, Joseph Borrell, he was the foreign policy chief for the European Union. He actually used the word a little while back. We talked about this on the live stream, impose. If Israel doesn't shape up, they can ship out, and we will impose a Palestinian state on Israel, whether they like it or not. Now, you might say, well, what's the big deal? You know, they get a state. Well, here's the problem. Well, one of many problems. For there to be a Palestinian state, that means Israel will have to give up sovereign Israeli territory, hand it over to the Palestinians. I don't know, but that's probably something Israel should have a say in, right? Probably something that shouldn't be imposed upon a sovereign nation. But that's what Europe wants to do. And believe me, if Kamala Harris got in office, good Lord, she would have wanted to do the same thing. Speaking from an American perspective, we have a reprieve, thank God, with Donald Trump. I pray it's a long window, but this is not a time to squander the second chance God has given us here in the United States. And that's why I do what I do. If you like what you're hearing, current events, breaking news, chiefly from Israel and the Middle East, but we hit the entire world, China, Russia, America, and beyond, and all from an unapologetically biblical perspective. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. And while you're at it, look, follow us, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and we've got the Stakelbeck Tonight YouTube channel as well, at Stakelbeck Tonight. Yeah, we've got 2 YouTube channels. And the Stakelbeck Tonight YouTube channel features clips from my nightly TV show on TBN, the world's largest Christian television network. It is called Stakelbeck Tonight, every weeknight, Monday through Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. And again, the clips here on YouTube at Stakelbeck Tonight. But okay, this is breaking news. We're talking breaking news. Macron just announced this. Here's more from the New York Post. French President Emmanuel Macron announced Thursday that France will recognize Palestine as a state amid snowballing global anger over people supposedly starving in Gaza. It's all Israel's fault. Not the fact that Hamas is literally hijacking the humanitarian aid. Israel's trying to send tons of humanitarian aid into Gaza, and it has. Hamas hijacks the aid, and they feast on it themselves, or they sell it at an exorbitant, elevated price to poor Gazans. It's demonic. But what do the facts matter? We can just blame Israel, the most convenient scapegoat in world history, the Jewish people and the nation of Israel. Macron said in a post on X that he will formalize his decision to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September. The urgent thing today, he said, is that the war in Gaza stops and the civilian population is saved. Which civilian population? How about the Israeli civilians? who for, I don't know, 2 decades had rockets and missiles rain down on them from Gaza, of course, also from Lebanon? What about those Israeli civilians that were bombarded with Iranian ballistic missiles last month in the 12-day war? Or the 1,200 who were butchered on October 7th, 2023? Yeah, just forget about those civilians. They're Jews. And what the world hates most is when a Jewish state, God forbid, is strong and stable and firm and confident and chooses to defend itself against the people who would like to slaughter it, harass it. The world is much more accepting of compliant, complacent Jews who don't fight back. And I say that as a Gentile, non-Jew, but let's face it. Once the Jewish state of Israel says, hey, wait a minute, it ain't 1940. Auschwitz, long gone. Never again means never again. We're going to stand up. We're going to live. We're going to defend ourselves. The world doesn't like that at all. And Macron, count him in that group. Now, the New York Post identifies France as the biggest and most powerful European country to recognize Palestine. True, Germany has not yet, and I hope it never does. More than 140 countries recognize a Palestinian state, including more than a dozen in Europe alone. France has Europe's largest Jewish population, although many are leaving because of rampant anti-Semitism. But here you go. France also has the largest Muslim population in Western Europe, and fighting in the Middle East often spills over into protests in France. I wonder why. And I think, and also, by the way, France's foreign minister is co-hosting a conference at the UN next week about a two-state solution, the two-state obsession. Hey, let's reward the Palestinians with a Palestinian state after October 7th. After a heinous massacre, let's give them a state. Oh, they've earned it. I mean, this is madness. We truly live, folks. The prophet Isaiah described the times we're living in where good is called evil and evil is called good. These are Bible times. They're prophetic times. But let's see here. There we go. Europe and its problem. I want to highlight this because, as I mentioned, France has Western Europe's largest Muslim population. In addition to its largest Jewish population, talk about a tinderbox. But again, many Jews are leaving France, which is a sad thing, but a necessary thing, I believe. I think in all of Western Europe, the Jewish people have a bullseye on their backs and they're under siege. And I think you're going to see waves of aliyah. That's a Hebrew word for going up to Israel, going home and escaping the anti-Semitic madness. But the dirty, not so secret, which is being exposed for all the world to see more and more, is that Europe, suicidally, if that's a word, has opened its borders over the past few decades to mass Muslim immigration. And I've covered this for years. I've written books about it. I've been on the ground in these European neighborhoods, the Muslim neighborhoods. I've been in the mosques. In many cases, these growing Muslim populations in places like Great Britain, Germany, Belgium, France, Sweden, yes, Sweden, they're large, they're young, they're restless, they're restive, they're growing, and they don't assimilate into the culture of their new country. So they form enclaves where they want to enforce Islamic Sharia law, not French law, British law, etc. They build mosques, then they build more mosques, and more come. And these insane, culturally suicidal Western governments let them come more and more, open borders for all. It's destroying Europe. And all it's led to is tension, and terror in many cases, where these new arrivals have carried out terror attacks on European soil. So Macron, I think, is throwing a bone to that growing French Muslim population, which is really, I mean, he's a beta male, and this is par for the course for him. This is his MO. But he's throwing them a bone and thinking that, Winston Churchill had a great quote, one of my heroes. He had many great quotes. but a quote about the crocodile eating you last, applying to appease. He was talking about appeasers, which he knew all too well. Neville Chamberlain, his predecessor as prime minister in the UK, who had peace in our time with Adolf Hitler. But I think Macron is trying, part of this is trying to appease his restless and growing and radicalized, in many cases, Muslim population. So that's a factor here. Here was Naftali Bennett. We're waiting for Prime Minister Netanyahu's response. We've got responses across the Israeli political spectrum. Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, I interviewed him here last year, called this a moral collapse. Macron's recognition of a Palestinian state after October 7th isn't diplomacy, he said. It's moral collapse. It rewards mass murder and tells Islamist terrorists, kill Jews and the world will hand you a state. This shameful decision will be tossed into the dustbin of history, God willing. And I agree with every word there. There's disgraces, then there's disgraces. This is to the eternal shame of Macron. Let's see who else hops on board in Europe. That's the problem, because this is an echo chamber in Western Europe. And to me, I mentioned the large growing Muslim populations there, but folks, again, this is suicidal, because the likes of Hamas, the average Palestinian on the ground despises Europe. You're going against your own interests. You're going against the Middle East only democracy, Israel, a nation which, look, is the first line of defense for Western civilization, the canary in the coal mine. If Israel goes down, we all go down. Israel is on the front lines battling the barbarians at the gates so that they do not come to our shores. Sadly, Europe has invited them in with a welcome mat, but Israel's trying to prevent terror, not only from hitting Israel, but in doing so, they're preventing terror, greater terror, from coming to America and Europe and the free world. So that's number one, why Europe is out of its mind to support the enemies of Israel and to support a weakening, because ultimately a Palestinian state is going to weaken Israel, because Israel would have to give up half of Jerusalem, its ancient and ancestral capital, and large chunks of Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland. That's problematic, not only from a biblical perspective, God gave the land to Israel, but it's problematic from a security perspective, in that Samaria is mountainous and Judea's got the Judean hills. Those mountains of Samaria, folks, I've stood there many times. The likes of Hamas, remember, Hamas isn't just in Gaza. They're in Judea and Samaria as well. So is Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So is the Iranian regime's agents who've been trying to sow chaos there. But these terror groups can just roll a missile launcher or a rocket launcher right out onto the mountains, Samaria, overlooking the Galilee, etc., below, Israel below, and have a field day. You can see Tel Aviv from the mountains of Samaria. Fire some rockets at Tel Aviv from that close vantage point in Samaria? Sure. It's all on the table. If the parameters for a Palestinian state that we've heard over the years still are what they've been, and I have no reason to believe they aren't, that means Judea and Samaria, the eastern half of Jerusalem, out the window. It's insane. Talk about suicide. That would be suicidal for Israel. But that's what Europe wants to impose, not broker. They've lost patience, Macron says. We're going to impose it. We're declaring it unilaterally, whether Israel likes it or not. Of course, this throws a massive bone to the Palestinians, not only to Hamas, but to Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority. It emboldens them. It rewards bad behavior. October 7th doesn't get much worse than bad behavior on that day. But here's more. But wait, there's more. And none of it good. Here's a statement today from the European Union. You have Macron, who again is, maybe the most influential, top 3 influential leaders in the European Union. 28 countries earlier this week, I might have mentioned this on a live stream earlier, signed a statement this week calling for an end to the war in Gaza. Joint statements, we, 25 countries, including many European nations, including France, again, trying to impose things on Israel, a Palestinian state, A Gaza ceasefire, whether Israel wants it or not. Israel would love a Gaza ceasefire. Guess what else Israel wants? It wants Hamas destroyed and never able to threaten Israel again, and it wants the hostages back. Bit of a asterisk there next to this statement by these 25 nations, including many Western nations. They're demanding, and they make the blanket accusations, false accusations. The Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population in Gaza is unacceptable. The Israeli government's aid delivery model is dangerous, fuels instability, and deprives Gazans of human dignity. Wow. I think many Gazans deprived themselves of human dignity, I'm sad to say, in 2006 when they voted for Hamas. But I digress. And these same signatories have said nothing about the massacre of religious minorities in Syria at the hands of Syria's new jihadist government. Funny how that works. This statement was signed by the foreign ministers of, it's a roll call of the West, folks, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. Basically everyone except Germany. Italy disappoints me. Giorgia Meloni is a conservative leader there, and I like a lot that she's done, but some of her statements on Israel have disappointed me over the months, and this disappoints me. She's doing a lot of great things otherwise. So you kind of sense the momentum building here, right? And here's today, the European Union warned Israel. You see the title of this live stream. The EU, the European Union, warns Israel, a warning, a threat. The European Union has warned Israel that it will take action over a worsening starvation crisis in Gaza caused by Hamas. The warning came from the EU's new foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, probably. She said on X, quote, all options remain on the table if Israel doesn't deliver on its pledges to ensure more humanitarian aid. Israel is killing civilians looking for aid in Gaza. It's indefensible, she says. So all options, it's all lies, but all options are on the table. What does that mean? Military option? Look, in America, when we say, hey, all options, when a leader here says all options are on the table, that means military action is a distinct possibility. It's an option. It's on the table. What does she mean there? The European Union wouldn't threaten some sort of military action against Israel, I don't think. But more likely, she's talking sanctions and things of that sort. Folks, this is the foreign policy chief for the EU. It goes deeper than that. We have practically every EU member, I just ran it down, who are demanding a Gaza ceasefire. And the pile-on continues. These nations should be thanking Israel for destroying Iran's nuclear weapons program, along with the United States, of course. They should be thanking Bibi and Trump, two modern-day Churchillian figures. Instead, they're condemning them. It's really sick. Again, a world turned upside down, good is evil, and evil is good. We're monitoring this very closely. All options on the table. Okay. Well, God's got all his options on the table as well. He's the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. By the way, we're talking about Europe and the rise of anti-Israel sentiment, anti-Semitism there. Folks, in the past week alone, have you followed this? Several really, I can't say shocking incidents because we're talking about Europe, but yesterday in Valencia, Spain, just yesterday, a group of 50 Jewish kids, they were from France, actually. They were in Spain for a summer camp. They were removed from an airplane at the airport in Spain, and their director, the director of the summer camp, was put on the ground and handcuffed and arrested. Why? Well, the airline says they were being disruptive. In reality, according to an Israeli government official, they were singing Hebrew songs. Oh my gosh, so disruptive. And also, according to this Israeli official, there were threats, well, not exactly direct threats, but menacing statements calling by members of the crew on this flight, calling Israel a terrorist state. It's a he said, she said thing, of course. But look, Spain's government is one of the most anti-Israel around. So is it any surprise we're seeing a trickle-down effect? And also, in Greece, 2 incidents this week. A cruise ship tried to dock with Israeli tourists. Anti-Israel mobs prevented this ship from docking at a Greek port. And then there were some Israeli tourist teenagers on the ground in Rhodes, an island in Greece. They were attacked and beaten. Last week in Dublin, Ireland, a man was attacked, a Jewish man on board a bus. We had a Jewish-owned restaurant vandalized in Germany. The list goes on. This is all in the past few days alone, folks. So again, I'll finish where I started. Wheat and tares, sheep and goats. Which side you stand on? Because, look, I could say as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord, and we will. But I can tell you, for Zion's sake, we will not remain silent on this channel. And the biblical mandate laid out in Genesis 12:3 to bless Israel, to bless the people of Israel, we take that real seriously. It's a core tenet and verse for this channel and for everything I do, not just on the YouTube channel, but Stakelbeck Tonight and speaking around the country, around the world. These are the times. These are the times. These are prophetic times. And look, the devil hates Israel, and he hates the Jewish people, hates them, because the existence of Israel is proof of God's existence. So at the end of the day, the miraculous, yes, miraculous rebirth of Israel in 1948 sent the prophetic time clock into overdrive. Fasten your seatbelts, because this is intensifying. I think you're going to see more Jews leave Europe and go to Israel. And here in America, look, the United States has been a safe haven for the Jewish people over the years. But even here, last month, we had a radical Islamist firebomb a group of pro-Israel demonstrators in Colorado, killed 1 person. Look at American college campuses, hotbeds of Jew hatred, anti-Israel sentiment. So the Western world is on a very slippery slope, wheat and tares, sheep and goats. Let's stay in prayer. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching.